All right. All right, so for our safety moment, in light of recent events with the severe thunderstorms and warnings and watches that we've been receiving throughout Massachusetts, this seemed like a timely message. So just a few tips to keep yourself as safe as possible if a severe thunderstorm is in the forecast. To stay updated, it's definitely a good idea to set your phone or any other devices to send notifications for weather alerts. While there is a thunderstorm taking place, avoid using electronics that are plugged into an electrical outlet. Avoid running water or any other plumbing. Stay away from windows, doors, porches, and concrete. Stay inside for 30 minutes from the last clap of thunder, if possible, and then move from outdoors into a building or a hard top car. If you are caught outside, and you're in a group setting, spread out. If you're on a bike, scooter, or motorcycle, get off. And then one of the more severe circumstances, if you can feel your hair stand up, crouch down in a ball-like position with your head tucked and your hands over your ears while minimizing contact with the ground. Hopefully, no one ever has to experience that. All right, so the agenda today, we do have a packed agenda starting with ongoing ASO study updates. Then we're going to lead right into the latest updates on the FERC Order 2023. Transitional cluster study, and then how those impacts may impact your project. Then we're going to get a little bit more specific on projects and distribution group studies that we already know will require an ASO study due to ISO New England's determination. And then from there, we will cover group studies and projects that are on ASO hold but are awaiting ISO New England's ASO study determinations. And then from there, we'll cover active or ongoing group studies or independent projects over 1 megawatt that are behind that ASO hold mark, and review those current estimated timeline expectations for those projects as well. We'll flash some resource links and then we can jump into the customer Q&A. We do have subject matter experts on the call here from our transmission engineering team that will help support any technical related questions too. So I'm just going to do my best to allocate enough time here for Q&A. We've already received a handful of questions, and assuming we will be receiving more throughout the presentation. And just an FYI, we will be posting this presentation, the recording, and eventually a Q&A doc on our website as well. All right, so first topic is ongoing ASO study updates. Here's a table of all of our ongoing ASO studies by region. There's 3 in the Western Central region, 3 in the Northern region, and 3 in the Southern region. Of those 9, 4 of those are level 3 comprehensive studies, and then the rest are non-comprehensive ASO studies. In this second column, we shout out the distribution group study that is included in the study, as well as any other independent projects. As you can see in Western Central, the NPL Northwest 002 was split into 2 different ASO studies, and that's due to their electrical closeness of the projects. The distribution territories are not always going to be the same as the transmission territories. And then NEMA, we have a project from Tewksbury 001 and other independent projects in that comprehensive study. 1 project from Methuen-Haverhill is in a non-comp, and then for SEMA, Fall River North, the entire group is going through a comprehensive study, and then 2 other non-comps in the South. All of these studies ongoing are expected to receive RC approval by October 2024, which is definitely great news. So ASO study start date in this column, and then the RC approval date is in that column. Once we receive that approval, if every project in the group study has already received RC approval, that group study can then come off hold. But if there's other projects in the group that are on ASO hold that have not gone through an ASO study yet or received RC approval, it wouldn't be able to come off hold. But for independent projects that are alone in the ASO study, those ones would be able to come off hold once that RC approval is received. All right, I'm going to jump into our next slide here, which is pretty wordy, but there is a very recent update to the FERC Order 2023 Transitional Cluster Study. As a result of it, ISO New England has made proposed changes to their interconnection planning procedure 5-6, aka PP 5-6, which is expected to go into effect in September of this year. Once and if those changes do go into effect, there will be major impacts to the screening criteria and frequency of how ISO New England makes the determination of the level of transmission analysis required for DG projects greater than 1 but less than 5 megawatts. What we call this in our world is an ASO study determination. So starting October 12th, these determinations, which were originally made on a monthly basis, will now not be made until after the FERC Order 2023 transitional cluster study is complete. And that cluster study is estimated to be complete by late 2025. Exact date is not known. The pro to this is that the updated process will establish clear and defined windows for the start and completion of each of our ASO studies. And this will also allow for more DG applications to receive that ISO New England RC approval without requiring an ASO study. In other words, this means that any DG project that is in between 1 and 5 megawatts or a distribution group study in the National Grid queue that has not received a determination by October 11th would not be able to receive a determination until late 2025. And those projects must remain on hold while we do await that ASO determination. We do understand that this is a very large change to the impacts and hold timelines. So we're going to work internally to see if we can identify any potential solutions to progress projects and holds that may be necessary while we await the second FERC cluster, which would be sometime after October 2025. So this next page here is just a flow chart of the process to receive an ISO New England ASO study determination and how that works before October 11th and how that would work after October 11th. So just trying to give a better visual understanding of everything I just said. Every project has a different could have a different study path. It could be an independent study for 55 business days, that mutually agreed upon study for standalone battery projects, 100 business day group study, 125 business day group study, or 160 business day group study. So each of those distribution studies all have different timelines as to when they would be able to go on ASO hold. For a project to be eligible to go on ASO hold, we would need certain transmission injection points identified by the distribution engineers. And that takes approximately 35 business days for 55 business days projects, 65 business days for 95 and 100 business day distribution studies, 80 business days for 125 distribution group studies, and then 105 business days for 160 business day group studies. And these are all approximate estimations. It's not exact. So once we do receive those transmission injection points, the distribution study is eligible for ASO hold. So it will be placed on hold. In order for us to go to ISO, though, we do need approved PSCAD models for all projects that are greater than a megawatt. So if all of these prereqs are complete by this October 11th date, that means we're able to request that ISO New England determination for ASO study. If this is not done by that October 11th date, then that project or distribution group study must wait and remain on that ASO hold point until sometime estimating the end of 2025, when we'll be able to receive ISO New England's next determination. So for projects that do receive determination by October 11th, there's two different paths that can take place. ISO might say that no analysis is required or a non-comprehensive study is required. So what that means for those projects is that they most likely would receive GNF approval by December 2024, and then their project or distribution study could come off hold. If ISO determines a level 3 ASO study is required, that ASO study would be performed in coordination with the transitional FERC cluster study. So sometime late 2025, that cluster study would end. And then for our projects, we would receive PPA approval within 90 days of the start of the next first FERC cluster study. And then once you receive that formal approval, those independent projects or distribution group studies can come off of hold. All right, so here's a list of all distribution group studies or independent projects that we already know are going to require an ASO study, and they're just pending that ASO study start date. So there's four in the north, the Cape Ann 001, Bethune Haverhill 001, North Andover 001, and an independent project. ISO determined that at least one project in the 3 group studies required a level 3. So that means the entire group, must remain on that ASO hold until all projects go through that ASO study and receive ISO New England approval. And then for Bridgewater 001, at least one project was determined to require a level 3, as well as another independent project. All of these projects included are estimated to be invoiced for that next round of ASO in October of 2024. And then those ASO studies would be performed in coordination with the FERC transitional cluster study. This is a list of distribution group studies and independent projects that are on ASO hold, but have not yet received that ISO New England ASO study determination. We have Leominster 002, Webster Southbridge, Charlton 002, and Millbury Grafton 002. They were on ASO hold, and then attrition did trigger that restudy, and the restudy can impact injection points. And like I mentioned earlier, we need certain injection points before we can bring those determination requests to ISO New England. But as of right now, all 3 group studies are on track to have those injection points determined by September. So we should be able to make that request with ISO by September. And then the other independent projects here, one of them we're requesting that determination this month, and then the rest are awaiting PSCAD model requirements before we can, get those requests in. And then this list here is all active, aka ongoing distribution group studies or independent projects that are behind that ASO hold mark, and then what we are estimating for timeframes for that ASO study determination. So Attleboro 001, Brockton North and South 002, Hanover 002, Hopedale East 002, Marlboro 002, Hopedale West 002, Billerica 002, Chelmsford Westford 002, and Beverly 002. These are all group studies, South and North region, and these we don't expect to get that determination until after the completion of this transitional FERC cluster study, as well as these 4 independent projects potentially may make it to that ASO hold point where we would be able to get that determination prior to that October deadline. TBD. And here we have the relevant resource links. I linked here up top the stakeholder meeting information. This is where we're going to be posting the slides from this, as well as the recording and the Q&A. And then our National Grid Monthly Group Study Status Update Report. This is on our group study distribution page, but it does include a lot of information for every group study area, whether or not there's an ongoing group study taking place. And this is updated monthly, the 15th of each month, and it is really, really helpful for ASO related updates as well. Our National Grid ASO updates page, and then these 3 linked below are all ISO related resources. but I did think it would be helpful for a better understanding on the FERC Order 2023 in general, that new PP5-6 proposal that I just went over about the determination deadlines. And then here is the order number 2023 website. And then I just screenshotted from that website a lot of their useful resource and related links. So I know that was fast. It was a lot of information, but we do want to give a lot of time here for Q&A, so we can jump right into that. I'm going to take you off of mute, Will, 1 second.
Can you hear me, Jamie?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Will Curran. I'm the manager for our complex interconnections here at National Grid, and I'm going to help progress through some of these questions here. So that link that was posted in the chat is open. If you have questions, you can submit through there. We did have a number of questions that were submitted before the meeting started, so we'll try to address the majority of those. We did have some questions that were not specific to this topic. We will not be addressing those here on the call today, but we'll do our best to address them individually. If you left contact information, we're happy to get back to you directly. If not, we'll try to answer them in the Q&A document that we'll ultimately post for these questions in this call itself. So, Jamie, jumping in with sort of an easy one here, right? Does FERC 2023 have an implementation date now? It was shared in April that the initial rollout date had been slightly delayed.
Yes, it is confirmed that FERC study will be starting in October of this year.
All right, so the next one I'll probably take real quick here because this has popped up in a couple of different forums along the way. But given the extraordinary circumstances with ASO New England regarding ASO studies, can National Grid please consider conducting group studies and impact studies in parallel, even if the final ISA cannot be provided until transmission capacity is confirmed? So that is something that we've been discussing internally. It's still under review. There are a number of moving parts here, right, and how things are being impacted, and still there's quite a bit of learning from a National Grid perspective around FERC Order 2023, what that process looks like and what those impacts are. So it is something we are open to the conversation on. We do not have a path forward as of yet, as we continue to figure out how FERC Order 2023 impacts the overall process, but is progressing and ongoing. The next one, it says, is please allow projects to construct and operate with zero export projections in place with ASOs ongoing. So that is an option, right, to progress as a non-export project. The caveat there is that you need to be offsetting new load. So if you are, coming in and putting DG in the same space as a new load project or a new building of some sort, and the plan is to just offset that new site load, then that's something that we would be able to sort of take the project out of the mainstream process and address it separately. So that is an option. What is not an option is to offset existing load, right? Because that existing load coming off, it has an impact on our base cases, on anything that we've interconnected to date. So if there was load that would have been part of earlier studies and taken into account as we identified system modifications for prior project interconnections, we would not be able, even if the project was going to be non-export, it would be offsetting load that we were aware of and existing load, and that would have an impact. It would need to be studied, meaning it would have to be part of pending group studies, right, and then along down the line to any ASO studies after that. Another one here quickly, Jamie, it says, please include information on whether 996 kW, so less than 1 megawatt projects, required to participate in group studies and ASO studies?
Yep. So for group studies, it would be required to participate in a group study if there was a group study in that area. For ASO study, no. ISO New England only requires greater than 1 megawatt projects to be studied if required at all and receive ISO RC approval. But for group study, it would be hard to avoid unless there wasn't a group study going on in that area. Although I do want to say if there was an ASO study required for at least one project in that group study, while this 99.96 kilowatt project wouldn't be required to participate in the ASO study, that project would have to remain on hold until that ASO study is complete and that project receives ISO New England approval.
Thank you. So there's a quick question here around SIPs. Well, SIPs aren't specifically tied to this here, right? I know that that's a question that's out there quite a bit, so I'll just address it real quickly here. National Grid is still waiting on determination of all of the SIPs that they filed with the DPU. We know that it is a priority of the DPU to get those ruled on and orders out on each one of those specific cases. So no update as of right now, but it is something we know that the DPU is actively working on. Let's see, the next one has a few questions I think that were more specific and answered throughout the presentation here, but one piece of this is once the restudy is completed, will there be an opportunity to change the operating parameters, and for example, going from scheduled to unscheduled? So I'll real quickly address that. So anything after the preliminary assessment, right? The opportunity to make changes is up to and after you receive the preliminary assessment. Once that study is sort of restarted or continued after the preliminary assessment, there is not going to be an opportunity to make changes after that point. Any change that is made after that point would most likely be considered a significant change and would follow the process around making significant changes to a project. So once the study is complete, right, there really is not going to be an opportunity to make changes. So just to be very clear, that preliminary assessment time is a pretty big milestone in the overall process, and that will however it's decided to move forward from there, that's what our engineering team will be using to progress the study. And again, any changes after that point would be considered significant changes. Okay. Jamie, moving on to the next one. I think this one for you. It says, what project size would avoid a group study?
So any 25 kilowatt project or below would definitely avoid a group study. Everything above that will be reviewed. Right now we're trying to, weed out the smaller projects as much as we can, but it does need to be reviewed.
And then similar question, but building on that, it says, is there a way to get out of a group study if the project is small in nature?
Yeah, so once we're preparing to open up a group window, that is when we'll have our screening team and our engineers, verify which projects can be weeded out at that time. So there's a way, it just really depends on what's going on in that area and if it is viable to move those projects out. And that does take place during that window period.
Thank you. The next one I'll take, it says, when will projects submitting an interconnection application behind an ongoing group study be evaluated? Will these projects be subject to the same SIP fee as the ongoing group study? And if there's an additional capacity being opened, if there is additional capacity being opened from the system upgrade. So I think Jamie kind of talked through that we don't know exactly the dates on a calendar as of yet when some of these the transitional cluster will be done and opening up those windows here. So I think more generally, a project that is behind behind a group study, right? A group study in an ASO study. When will that project be able to move forward? And it's ultimately at the end of the process, at the end of the study process. Once an impact study is delivered, right, an ISA is delivered and signed at that point, we would be opening up a group study window on or about that point of the process. Right, it's all about setting the base case for the next study. So we need to know what's being built, what's moving forward. We also have to be comfortable in understanding what attrition may or may not happen, and be able to work off of all those data points to make that decision. So as we are progressing right towards the end of the study process, as mentioned earlier, it's still in series, right? That there is distribution work that's done, will go on hold for an ASO, steps of the process. And then once ASO has completed, we would pick up and complete the distribution portion of the study. As we start to get to the end of that, where those reports become available and ISAs are being drawn up, that's when we will start the process around progressing projects that have been on hold behind groups. So it could be a lengthy process in some cases, but as one of the pros that Jamie pointed out earlier, right, that it is going to be much more structured and we should have a better idea about how those are going to be laid out going forward. And then just to address, whether there would be additional capacity, right? And if the SIP fee would apply, and yeah, the answer is yes, right? So as long as there is available capacity created by the upgrades as part of the SIP fee would still apply to any projects in follow-on group studies. Next one, Jamie, it says, why can't projects in active distribution group study be submitted for ASO determination right now?
So I mentioned earlier transmission injection points, and that is something that's identified within the distribution study. And there's different timelines of when those transmission injection points are identified based off of the timeline of the distribution study. So if your project or that group study does not have those injection points identified yet, that is why we aren't able to get those ASO study determinations, because ISO New England bases their decision strictly off of those injection points.
Thank you. Next one's also you, Jamie. Says we have 3 DGs that have been behind an ASO study in Uxbridge. What's the status since the study has been completed in Uxbridge? So I think maybe specific to this, and then more general, what happens when a prior study has been completed.
Yep, so Uxbridge is part of the Hopedale West area. Hopedale West 001 group study is technically complete. There are some steps that still need to progress before we can open that Hopedale West 002 window. But we're in the final phase of that right now. So that group window is pending, but it should be opened, I believe, within the next month or so. That's the status. Those specific cases, I'd have to take a look to see where they are, but I'm assuming that they're in the Hopedale West 002 on hold behind. So when it says behind an ASO study, it's behind the preceding group study, which is Hopedale West 001. So you should be seeing that group window open shortly. And always refer to that group study monthly update report. It has estimated timelines of when we believe those status will change. And then what was your follow-up question? And
yeah, I was just saying, like, as a more general, just I'm sure this was happening to other projects in other areas.
Yep.
I think.
Yeah, same thing. If you're in the same boat, you've been on hold behind. If if it says behind ASO, that would mean that it's behind a group study. And that could mean that that group study just hasn't progressed to the point of completion where we're able to open up that second window.
All right, we got a couple more questions here. Carlos, I'm going to put you on the spot. Carlos Perez is one of our transmission planning managers here. But it says to clarify, since PPA approval can't start until about 90 days after the next study opens, does this mean that the last ASO study completed before October 11th, 24 won't have PPA approval until 90 days after studies resume in late 2025?
Thank you, Will. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So first, let me just clarify that that we have until 90 days after the next study opens. What that means is that any ongoing ASO in coordination with a FERC cluster study will have until 90 days to secure approval of the PPAs. Right now, in terms of in terms of any active ASO study that is being performed now, what that means is that ISO will determine, come around the early October timeframe. ISO will determine if the study will look at any of the ASO studies that are in its final stages, and if ISO feels that the projects under that study can receive PPA approval by the December 2024 Reliability Committee meeting, then ISO will then include those projects in the base cases of the transitional cluster study. However, we will have to ensure that those projects, the PPA for those projects, are indeed presented and to latest at the December Reliability Committee meeting.
Thank you, Carlos.
Okay.
So just a heads up, that link still is open, right? So if anyone has any questions you want to submit real quickly in through there, we'll try to address them, but we got a couple more left. So this question is, are there additional studies required after the FERC 2023 study completed in late 2025, right? So Jamie, I'm going to start, and maybe you can fill in some gaps here. I think this is a more general question, but going forward, FERC Order 2023 is more of a process than a singular study. What we have right out in front of us is a transitional cluster study that the ISO is going to be undertaking, and that's going to kind of take us from this old process to the new process, and how they're looking at studies and how they're grouping those clusters. So there will be ongoing studies going forward, right? I would say in perpetuity, right? That will run into additional cluster studies from a transmission perspective, right? And we will have, and those will have, to Carlos's point, right? The idea of that timeline after a cluster study completes, in order for us to get in any of our PPAs or completed studies that we have, right, is all about setting the base case for that next cluster. And then us moving forward with ASO studies, including the, what's being determined as part of those cluster studies into any base case that would exist for the ASO studies. So there will be ongoing studies at any and all times. And we'll, review those and address those and work with the ISO on, understanding what the timelines are, understanding where those cluster studies are happening and how they impact, right? What would be national grid territory and whatnot. So, but yeah, there'll be ongoing studies, right after this transitional cluster, within that same FERC Order 2023 process. So I hope that answers the question. I don't know, Jamie, if you have anything else to add there.
No, I think you covered it.
Okay. So we got a couple of more specific questions, Jamie. One's about status of the Brockton South 002 study. Did you cover that?
I did. Hold on. I'm just going to go back. Brockton South 002. So that one is active, but we won't have those injection points until after that October deadline that I said. So we will be expecting that ASO study determination after the completion of the transitional for cluster.
Okay. There's another one here. It says we have a 93 kW project that's been on hold for over 18 months. The project is sized to offset building load, and if there's any update on when projects like this are going to move forward. So just to clarify some of this, anything over 25 is going to be subject to the complex process and thus ending up in a group study. And then once in a group study, depending on who the members are and what size those projects are, it may be subject to an ASO. So we are reviewing a number of things around system sizes, right? How we're screening those, and a lot of conversations in different forums are happening around that. As of right now, the opportunity for a project like that to move forward is that once a group has been created and has been kicked off, the engineering team here does review any projects, of a smaller size, generally under 500, for the opportunity to pull them out of the group and allow them to progress on their own, right? They're looking to see, where they're looking to interconnect. Are they contributing to, common system modifications that would need to happen? And then if it's determined that, that project of that smaller size doesn't have that impact, then it would be pulled out of the group and allowed to progress. If you are in queue behind an ongoing group, you will continue to be on hold until that new group study window has opened and started to progress at that point. So I got one more here. And I'm going to say, Jamie, this will be yours. It says specific to Hopedale 001. How is a customer supposed to know that they are behind additional studies when Uxbridge says it's been completed? When is Hopedale 001 expected to complete, right? I think I may change that question just a little bit to make it more, but, how are customers being communicated to who are behind on that ASO hold, because, or on a group study hold pending a prior group study or ASO study ahead of them to complete? How are they being notified of the status of the studies and of the project ahead of them? Projects ahead of them.
So if your project is in the status that says study hold behind ASO hold, although it should say behind group study, but that's being fixed right now. But if it says study hold behind ongoing ASO hold, that means that your project is sitting behind a group study. Once that, if that status would change to group study once that group window is able to open, specifically to Hopedale West. Yes, the study is complete, but they're currently in the process of ISA delivery, and we're not able to open a new window until the ISAs have been delivered, which is why your project status has not progressed to group study yet.
Okay, that is the end of the questions that have been submitted.
All right. All right, yeah, and just to reiterate, I will be posting the slides and presentation on that stakeholder meeting website. This website was shared with you in the latest reminder email link that you received last night. So just be sure to check that within a couple hours, and the slides should be up and ready to go. But I think that's it. Thank you all so much for joining. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you do have any specific questions, but I think we can wrap up.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.